We're going to move now to the state of the states of Idaho and Washington with regard to water. I have so enjoyed learning about Gary Spackman, the director of the Idaho Water Resource Department. You know, it's an organization that's long and proud in this state. It goes back to 1895, I think, when we first had the state engineer, and one of his key responsibilities was water. And over the years, it's morphed into a number of organizations more and more focused, more and more responsible for water. It took its first form of the Water Resources Department in 1974. And Gary, who's with us tonight, has been with the lead of this organization since 2009. He's a special man with a wonderful background. He grew up on a small dairy farm, and it was all about water in his life. And he had a lot of great lessons over the years, and some of which I just really wanted to share with you. One of the things he's known for, he knows how to build a square haystack that won't fall over in the winter. He knows how to build a straight barbed wire fence. When he was a kid, they had somebody that was always on the night watch for their irrigation system, and apparently because he was the one that was easiest to wake up, that was his job. So he was up close and personal with irrigation since he was a young child. One of the other things that I learned about him is if there's ever a leaky gopher hole in an irrigation ditch, you can count on him to be the one to plug it in the middle of the night with a shovel. This is a man who's on the team who really knows water. Please check his bio. It's a wonderful background. We're very honored to have him with us. Gary?
Thank you. Well, someone did some investigating to find that particular bio that I had written up that I like to distribute to people, and I prefer it to, and I think it has better qualifications than most of the other things that I've done in life. I want to tell you that years ago there was a lady that I gave some dictation to. I think she was typing a letter, and it was long enough that she called me after she transcribed the dictation. She called me Windy. And I just hope after this particular presentation tonight that I don't have the nickname the Flapper. So I'm hoping that my comments will be concise enough that I don't get another nickname. I'm also always concerned when I visit with a group like this that my presentation doesn't assume some of those terms that are often thrown out, and I want to tell you some of them that I intend to avoid tonight. And some of those terms are, I will not tell you that I want you to incorporate, to collaborate, and to cooperate, because it seems to me that those themes are always a part of a speaker that's in my position, and a couple of the others that I won't give you is that I won't tell you that I want you to improvise, or the term that's even worse than that, and that's to incentivize. So you won't hear those things and those admonitions from me tonight. What I want to tell you is a similar story, though, and this is a college town. So I want to tell you about one of my daughters who went off to school the first year, and she was placed in a dormitory with 4 other freshmen and a senior, all of them girls, of course, and the senior decided that she wanted to set a standard for these girls coming in, and so one of those standards was that every night they'd all gather together and stand in a circle. At least I think they were standing, although I don't know, and they'd all link little fingers. Now this is a true story, and they'd pray together. And then when they finished, then they would turn to the person on their right and on their left and say, "Sure love you." And of course, after a couple of those experiences, now a freshman coming in like my daughter, she was impressionable and wanted to do what was right. But I think it only took a couple of times she started looking around the room thinking, "Is this real?" And so tonight, I guess I could tell you, first of all, however you petition deity is up to you. But I could sure tell you how to link little fingers and also tell you how to express love for each other. And I think that's part of the process that we need to go through in some ways. I was talking to Dale Ralston about this group and some of the things that are happening. I've been impressed by the presentations. I have read through the intergovernmental agreement for another time on the way up here. I've read it a couple of times before. I've read through the management plan, at least the germane portions of it. And I actually also read an advanced copy of Steve Robichon's 2012 report, and I am impressed. I want to congratulate you on your achievements and also your adherence to the standards and actually coming in below many of those standards that you set, both for annual increases of water use and also the threshold. And I think the report says you're 16% below what you anticipated you might be on the upper end at this point in time. And I think you're to be congratulated for that effort. And it also said that, I looked at the upper threshold. I think it was 125% of an early 1990 use, and you're well below that. And yet in all of it, it appears water levels are still declining. So the work isn't done. And you're also probably faced with growth. I listened to Steve's presentation and the reduction in the increases in water use over the last few years. And perhaps that's a result of the efforts of this group in trying to conserve water, and I'm sure it is. As we work in some of these arenas, we recognize that some of it may be a byproduct of our present economic conditions, and that we may not have as much pressure on us as we might otherwise have in another time frame. And my guess is those times are coming back. So as a person that works in water and that looks at the things that need to be done, and one of the things that I always try to take away from meetings that I attend, whether it's with a group like this, whether it's with a group of employees, or with others that I often meet with, I try to set some deliverables. In other words, ask the question, what do we take away from this? And what can we do to improve? And who's assigned to do what? And who will report back on those assignments? And so in looking at the management plan and some of the obligations that were established in the management plan, there are some things that we can do, I think, as a Department of Water Resources in the state of Idaho and this larger bi-state group. And one of the commitments that we made was to dedicate someone to your organization. And I know Bob Haynes was here and participated for a long period of time, had a personal interest in what was happening in the Palouse Basin. And Bob retired, and he probably still has a personal interest. I'm surprised he's not here tonight. But we need to ensure that there is someone here and actively participating. I think that's been the case. We've had some people attend, but it's my understanding that Keith Franklin, our new regional manager there, is and wants to take that responsibility on personally. And the other thing that I noticed is that the state of Idaho, at least, wants the input of this group in the water right decisions that it makes in the Palouse Basin. And I don't know, and I could ask this question, I see at least one of our staff out there, I don't know how diligent we have been in sending proposals, applications for water use in the basin to PBAC and have PBAC then review those and give us recommendations. And I think it's important for us to do that so that we vest in the committee the authorities that we assigned at the outset. Now, if we as a department are willing to send you those kinds of solicitations, then we want some reciprocity. So we'd like a response. And sometimes those responses are tough to give, and whether they be negative or whether they be positive. But it would be nice if we're going through those processes, if the committee could really be active in expressing their sentiments. And I want to tell you that the sentiments of a group like this, particularly where we have some people who have expertise in the sciences, is of great value, both in terms of the technical review, but also in expressing the public interest. I think we could use some help on the legislative side. There are a number of things that are being discussed legislatively. One of them right now is some amendments to the Municipal Water Rights Act of 1996. There probably will be legislation on that subject. And it really has to do with the opportunity for protection of water supplies in the future for municipal providers. But there may be other opportunities for people to see that legislation and contribute input to meaningful changes in the law. So there will be legislation this upcoming legislative session in the state of Idaho related to municipal water rights and the appropriation of or the changing and acquisition of water rights for municipal use. I think there's a lot of sentiment out there about the limitations or the boundaries of exempt domestic water uses and where those really should be. And for a long time, people have felt very strongly that a person should be able to drill a well, tap into the groundwater, and divert a pretty significant quantity of water for their domestic use, including irrigation. And maybe those boundaries and those parameters need to be looked at again. We also have a larger problem with respect to these uses on the enforcement side. And it's very difficult to ensure that every one of those users is within the half-acre irrigation limitation statutorily established for exempt domestic wells. One of the most important assignments that this group and PBAC took on was education. And I think often, I can tell you I derived a lot from the presentations tonight already and some of the progress that's being made in the efficient use of water. And last of all, we really need your ideas. And ideas and the expression of those are what really makes a difference in finding alternatives. Now, just in closing, I want to tell you a couple of other things. You know, it used to be, I had a boss that told me that the state engineer in the state of Idaho used to go out and look at water supplies, sit down with staff and draw out new irrigation and water delivery systems and the location of points of diversion, and then travel out on a train and stand on the back with Old Glory and the flag of the state of Idaho hanging off and tell these people what wonderful things the state of Idaho will do for them in providing new water supplies and water for their use. And it was a time when at least there was a perception, and I think it was true, that there was water available for appropriation. And it's difficult to transition into a mentality that water is a finite and limited resource, and that we need to be cautious about our use of it, and people need to adhere to a lot of standards related to its use, both quality and quantity, both for the protection of the use and for the protection of senior water right holders. And there's not a lot of additional water. We can build additional storage. We can try to cloud seed. We can try to take the peak off the hydrograph and put it in the ground for managed recharge. But we can't create a lot more water. And what we can do is implement some measures to try to assist. And much of what I've heard tonight was related to conservation. As we go through these processes, we find that economics starts to drive the use of water. And before the economics, the attorneys drive the controversy. And when the cost of litigation reaches a certain level, then people look at it, and the court decisions don't always come down in people's favor. Then people look at it and start to find solutions. And I hope that we can be ahead of that in this basin and that we can find those solutions. A couple of things that might be helpful. There was a proposal a few years back in front of the legislature and in other circles about adjudicating the water rights in the Palouse Basin. We have been gathering claims in the Coeur d'Alene Basin. That's nearly complete. I think the Palouse was the next in line, and there needs to be a dialogue with legislators and others about whether we move forward with funding for an adjudication in this area to quantify the water rights. The last thing that I'll tell you is that there is pressure on me to administer water rights conjunctively, and that means I administer groundwater rights along with surface water rights, or administer the groundwater rights according to priority. And I can tell you that that process often forces solutions that aren't the best solutions for parties. It results in curtailment orders and results in both emotional and economic turmoil. And so to the extent that the Department of Water Resources can help this area and this organization fend off and avoid those kinds of controversies, I want to dedicate my time and energy to it. With that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Gary?
Thank you.
Oh. Planning Committee.
Thank you
so much for your comments. Oh, yes. We'll take one question.
Little teeny switch. What are the prospects of bi-state adjudication of the Palouse Basin, given that we have that pesky state line bisecting the basin itself? Is there a mechanism for, I hate to use that word collaboration since you cautioned us at the outset, but working together across that state line for adjudicating all of the water rights in the basin?
Well, thanks for the question. The adjudication is really a state-run procedure. So it's conducted in the state courts. There are some that have been conducted in the past in federal courts. I don't think the state of Idaho would be interested in having the federal courts take it on at this point. And I guess I would have the state of Washington representative talk about adjudications there. But it's a matter right now in the state of Idaho of local initiative and probably legislative appropriation. Thank you.